Todd McShay breaking down Jalen Walker as a prospect. An edge rusher, off-the-ball linebacker, some versatility there.
Yes.
That has been linked to the Patriots by Mike Giardi earlier in the week. Giardi says he's got a lot of fans in the building here at Gillette. I will point out when McShay says, what's the difference between these two guys? Maybe a couple inches.
Hello.
I mean, I feel like
if that's all?
If that's all we're talking, a couple inches could really,
All right.
I would imagine, come into play. Not
Sure.
that I would know, but I would imagine that would come into play. So it's interesting. He's rising up boards, it seems. He says 5 is where you start talking about him, which is after the Pats. 9 feels like the floor. 8 seems a natural fit in Carolina for Jalen Walker. I find this whole thing amusing where it's like every day it's like, oh, maybe it's Jalen Walker. Oh, maybe it's Will Campbell. Oh, maybe it's Mason Graham, right? And we're as guilty of that as anybody else. I don't mean to absolve us of that. We've spent a lot of time following the draft and talking about what could happen at 4. But when names start coming out of what I would consider left field, where we've established now that a month's worth of conversation, and we're talking about pick 4, we're not talking about pick 10.
No.
There's only so many things that can happen in front of the Patriots where prospects rise or fall, and a name comes out of what I would consider the woodwork. Guys can rise up, but between Membu and Jalen Walker, it's one of two things. Either we have too much time to talk about the draft and kick around, and now we're just throwing names out there. Very possible.
Yes.
Or the Patriots don't really know what to do at 4 because they don't love any of these guys. The guys they love are the obvious guys, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, and they don't really love any of these other prospects, which, by the way, I wouldn't blame them for. I don't know that anybody really loves these guys.
Well, perhaps that talk is, all right, well, what happens if you trade down, right? Because maybe it's not you're taking any of these guys at 4, but it's like, all right, well, what if the player you really like goes off at 3 and then you get blown away with the trade offer? What would you do? How far would you be willing to go down? And then who would you target? And then you'd have to figure another handful of guys' names would be off the board. That would be my hope, because Jalen Walker might end up being a great player in the NFL. But if they walked away with him in the first round, I'd be devastated.
Yeah.
I'd be like, how do you do that? Like, I think it's either Abdul Carter or offense. So even the next best defensive player, he very, very well could be the next best defensive player. I don't want that. They were all defense in free agency. I think he's good, but I don't think he is, what Abdul Carter could be. So that would be pretty rough. That would also be a tough sell to Drake May. Be like, hey, did you see that first round last night? What'd you do? Yeah, the defensive guy. We're beefing up that line. You're like, okay, great. Like, right. I needed somebody to throw to or somebody to block for me.
So instead of rushing out and getting Harold Landry, could you have got me a wide receiver way back when?
Would have been nice.
Because
left tackle.
That is a fair way to look at, or a left tackle, exactly. So I'm just starting to wonder if they're like they don't love any of these guys.
Yeah.
And ideally, you said trade back. The problem is there may not be a match to trade back. I think we've highlighted this now for a few weeks on this show. Everybody says trade back. Well, trade back. Oh, obviously, just trade back.
It is an easy thing to say.
What if you can't get what you want? Or what if you can't get fair value? What if you don't get a future first and a second and what it would take to move down? So if you're not getting that, do you just stand there and take your guy, or do you just get the best offer, even if it's below market, to move down? Is that good business? So I wonder if the Patriots are just a little stuck. And the reason we hear names like Membu and now Jalen Walker and Campbell and Mason Graham and all these names kicked around, they're hoping for Carter or Hunter.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just trying to throw people off the scent. I'll allow for that. Maybe the mock draft community is bored. I wonder if the Patriots really have a guy that they are in love with and are going to pound the table for at pick 4. I don't know that guy exists.
Here's still my hope. And you might be right about that. Maybe they don't love anybody, or maybe they do love Carter, and maybe they do love Hunter, and they're just coming to the realization that those guys might not be there. However, I still go back to quarterbacks get overdrafted. Teams go crazy for quarterbacks, because you can go back over the last just 10 years and take 2 weeks before the draft. Where was Zach Wilson going? Where was Trey Lance going? Where was Bo Nix going? Anthony Richardson, Baker Mayfield. Like, where were all those guys going just 2 weeks before the draft? And we've already seen plenty of talk of Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart being in the top 10. So they're already in the top 10. So in the next week, could those guys go in the top 5? Could those guys push one of the great players down to 4? I still think, that is what I'm holding out hope for, and I think it's very realistic.
Just to bring something up, since you brought up the quarterback names, and maybe this is another example of what we were just talking about. Too much time. Mock draft community has too much time to talk about it. You start throwing out other scenarios out there. you're starting to hear a little bit of Jackson Dart could go before Shedeur Sanders.
It's fine.
And
I don't care who it is.
This
as long
is
as somebody.
And I'm not a big fan of Dart specifically.
Me neither.
This came out yesterday, too, though. Lou Riddick on First Take was talking about Shedeur, and he says, I hope he doesn't go in the top 3 picks. I hope he doesn't, and I think his camp would tell you the same thing. There are other teams they want to go to.
Where does he want to go?
Well, do you think he doesn't want to go in the top 3, or you think it's starting to become clear he's not going to go in the top 3, so they're putting that narrative out there?
Can't fire me, I quit.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't want to go to the Titans, the Browns, or the Giants. We actually have another team in mind. That's where we always wanted to go to New Orleans or whatever. We always wanted to go to Pittsburgh at 21.
So Pittsburgh, maybe.
Maybe
Pittsburgh, because you're like, that's a team that's got a pretty high floor. It's got a good head coach. You can go in there and, as long as you're not Kenny Pickett, which I don't think he is, maybe you have some level of success. The other teams, you do want to go in the top 3. You do want to be picked that high. So that's just how it goes.
And look, that's Lou Riddick passing along that he thinks the camp feels that way. That's not a concrete report by any means, but I wonder if that's an indication that they know he's dropping. And if he's dropping, that's not, unless Dart is rising, that's not great news for the Patriots.
I think Dart is rising. The question would be, is it just in response to Sanders falling? And is it sort of like a quarterback big board thing, or is it like an overall big board thing? Because Jackson Dart, a month ago, probably wasn't a first-round pick. We were arguing over who the third best quarterback was. Everybody had a different answer at that point. Some said Jalen Milroe. Some said Dart.
Your answer is Milroe?
Milroe to me, yeah.
That's the same with me, yeah.
Yeah, I think he is the third best. I wouldn't take him in the first round, but then again, teams go crazy. They're afraid someone's going to snipe their quarterback or whatever else. So he still could, but yeah,
and run and throw. He's built like a brick house.
Yeah, we certainly aren't alone.
Why don't you forget Jalen Milroe?
That guy called months ago about Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, he wanted to take him like number 1 overall. I think.
It's September.
Yeah,
about Jalen Milroe.
I think
if the Pats have Drake May.
Well. But it was September.
Vanderbilt the next
week.
But
I think that guy
that did lose a Vandy.
If I remember correctly, I think that guy was like, I don't even like Drake May. Go get Jalen Milroe. I think was the reason for that.
Well, either way. But yeah, no, it is wild. I love the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty still with 2 weeks to go. I mean, the one thing that seems like a lock is Cam Ward, but 2-3, we have no idea. I know Schefter's like, Hunter too. But like a week ago, you said Carter too. So like next week that could change as well. I think it's going to be a fascinating top of the draft.
Meanwhile, the Patriots have Abdul Carter in for a visit, a top 30 visit. On Monday, not today. They're going to be doing it early next week. Mm-hmm. And he's only making 4 visits. It's the teams drafting 1, 2, 3, 4. Rap Sheet says this seems like the floor on Abdul Carter. Do you think he's dropping? Or do you think it's just
quarterback horny?
Hunter's special?
I think it's Hunter and quarterbacks.
Okay.
Yeah, so I still think...
And you would view it the same way. You like Hunter over Carter.
Yes.
And if you're quarterback needy, they get pushed up, so you don't even necessarily disagree with that.
No, I think he's the second best player in the draft, but I think 2 quarterbacks will still get sort of based on need will go, and then Hunter, which I don't think is really even a slap at Carter. So it's like you got pushed down because of the Heisman winner who plays 2 sides of the ball. Like, okay. Now, if Mason Graham or Will Campbell or somebody like that gets picked ahead of him, then he's falling, and then it's like, all right, is this something up with his foot, or like is it worse than we thought? That would be more of a free fall. If he does pass the Patriots, if he goes 5th or 6th, then you're like, what happened there?
So I wonder if it's injury, and we asked Kern about that the other day. He's like, I haven't heard anything on that. I mean, I don't know that anything is again concrete, firm reporting that he's going to miss time. Even if he was going to miss the start of training camp, there's a big difference between a rookie who you're going to have for 5 years and is in his early 20s missing the start of training camp versus a guy like Steph Diggs on a 1-year deal in his 30s off an ACL injury. So I wonder if the medicals are an issue. McShay even said, and he was more talking up Jalen Walker, but he more said in that clip, well, Jalen Walker is a guy you want in your building. And you wonder if that's an indirect dig at Abdul Carter. Like, I'm okay with the guy if he is, not the hardest worker or maybe not the best personality on a crummy team like this. If you really believe in his talent, I'm more than okay with getting that guy in the building, cross the bridge with his attitude, his work ethic, all that stuff when you get there. I'm not overdrafting Jalen Carter at 4 because I like his work ethic versus the talent. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I'm not in the spot to just draft all good guys. There was one draft that Bill Belichick took Remember, it was like all team captains or something like that.
The Tavon Wilson draft, that one?
It was Jordan Richards, I think.
Oh, was it that one?
Because you're like, Jordan Richards in the second round, and then you look at the end of the draft, I think they were all like 4 or 5 year players. They were all like captains, and I'm sure at that point they were all good guys. Now, they certainly didn't do that every year, but I think there was one year where they kind of prioritized that. I'm like, I don't know, get the guys that can play. And if there's a little bit of a question with Carter, then all right, that's why you're paying Mike Vrabel all that money. And Terrell Williams. Like, those guys should be able to get the most out of Abdul Carter. I'd take my chances with that.
617-779-7937. What's the plan at 4 for the Patriots? Is there anybody they actually like? Good text here, 617-779-7937. Guys, here's a thought. Maybe the Patriots know exactly who they want in the draft. Maybe they're just throwing out a bunch of names and they're trying to just keep people off the scent. They don't want the Giants to fall in love with them.
But if the guy's Hunter, like, you can know who you want, but because you're picking fourth, there's a lot of uncertainty.
That's fair, too. Like, I bet they like Hunter. I bet they like Carter.
Well, Vrabel had that line last week, remember, where they were like, well, if you tell me who's going 1, 2, and 3, I can tell you who we're taking at 4. Being like, all right, they clearly, I think, like a guy, or maybe 2, but there's also a chance that neither are available.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've heard enough names at 4 where maybe it's just a master class and they're manipulating the board. They don't want the Giants to talk themselves into somebody at 3.
Yeah.
They don't want the Giants to trade back and have somebody leapfrog them at 3. And so they're just trying to throw people off the scent. Or maybe I'm just reading too much and the names popping out of nowhere. But I wonder if they actually like anybody at 4. And by the way, I wouldn't blame them if they don't. Most people don't like this draft. That's not a wild thing to suggest the Patriots may not like anybody at 4, since nobody really likes the draft outside of the top 2 guys. Let's go to the phones here. Our buddy Sorja is in Mansfield. What's up, Sorja?
Jones and Keefe, how are we today?
Very good.
So, like always, you guys are usually on top of things. And you guys remember a couple weeks ago you mentioned the nightmare scenario of taking Campbell at 4. And that's given me a lot of anxiety because he doesn't feel a need because he won't be able to play left tackle. And I don't think as a talent he's that great. And I just really hope that Abdul Carter can fall into our laps because, like you said, Keith, like we hear this every single year where Jackson Dart went from a second round and now he's a top 10. So I think there's one of 2 possibilities. You either trade down and maybe get a guy like Ted McMillan, or you trade up and secure it where you get Abdul Carter. But you cannot take Will Campbell at 4.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, you'd take him at 4 if those other guys are gone.
If it goes quarterback, Hunter, Carter, I would just take Will Campbell. I wouldn't want to get too cute. I'm not trading down for Ted McMillan. I don't want to trade too far down where you don't even get Will Campbell because you're like, oh, well, the Saints need a quarterback, so maybe they move up to get the quarterback. If you go at 9, now you're really leaving it up to all these other teams, and then you're like, oh, we didn't get – you can't pick at 4 and miss out on 4 of your favorite prospects.
No.
Like, you literally should get one of those guys.
Right. It might be.
And I also don't love the idea of trading up only because you need these picks. You need even future picks. Like you need all these things.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, maybe if the Patriots could move up a spot and because everybody wants to move down and nobody really wants to move up and nobody likes the draft, maybe you're able to move up a spot for less than it would traditionally cost. But I'm with you. Trade down sounds nice in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
But number 1, what if you don't get what you want? Number 2, what if you move down to 9 or 10? New Orleans looks like a logical spot if somebody's going to move up for a quarterback. So I think 9 makes a lot of sense. What if you move down to 9 and you miss out on your guys? You might have won.
Trading down.
You might have won on the trade chart.
Yeah.
You might have won on the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart. But great, what'd that get you if you don't get a guy that you wanted at 9 or you envisioned being there at 9? And I don't know that I trust Vrabel to big brain it. I like what Vrabel's done in free agency.
Yeah.
And, I think it's clear he's running the show. I didn't like the Milton trade. But do I trust Mike Vrabel enough to say we're going to move down and our guy's going to be there at 9? No, I didn't really even trust Bill to do that.
And also, one thing I disagree with is I don't think you can say drafting Will Campbell doesn't fill a need. There's a chance, like every other guy, he's a bust, or there's a chance, like every other guy, that maybe you have to move positions, but I think you're drafting him as a left tackle, and you at least are starting the camp with him at left tackle.
We'll play something from Bedard coming up, but you started to hear a lot of this too. It's like, well, you could play him at tackle for a year, and he's better than what you have, and then maybe he'll kick inside the guard and be an all-pro.
Well, that I don't want. That doesn't sell me.
No, me neither.
I don't want him to be a guard. You drafted Cole Strange as a guard in the first round, and that was a huge mistake.
I don't want him to come in and play tackle, where he's just better than what you have at tackle, which he probably is, if we're being honest. He's probably better than Vidarian Lowe as a tackle, even with short T-Rex arms.
It's all right.
He's probably better than Vidarian Lowe. So, okay, fine, he's better than what you have. That doesn't mean he's worth the number 4 pick.
No, that's pretty steep.
That's literally drafting for need, which will get you, when you're a crummy team, I think, into trouble. A competitive Super Bowl contender can do that. A team at the bottom of the heap trying to get better and get better quickly, drafting for need can get you into a big issue there. 617-779-7937. One more thing from Breer on Jalen Walker. He says, I'm not a scout, but in talking to those who are, I would chase the ceiling of Walker and what he can be as a Swiss Army knife for your defense, who's going to be a really good pro, over Will Campbell, who's going to be a really good pro, but may wind up being a guard. There's a little bit of this with Walker, too, and we were talking, Keefe, because we're going to do edge players tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
I view him as more of an edge player than an off-the-ball linebacker.
It's kind of a tweener.
Well, right. You can look at that as a positive with him, where it's like, okay, this guy can move around the formation. He's a chess piece, and Vrabel will know how to use him. And I might buy into that to a degree. I like that more than a guy who is a tweener between a tackle and a guard where you got to pick a spot. You're not going to be moving in between positions on the offensive line within a game. This guy you can move around based on down and distance and run situation versus passing situation and all these things. But I do wonder if it's versatility, or I wonder if, as you said, he's a tweener and he doesn't really have a fit. And again, there's not a lot of airtight guys at 4 in this draft, which makes this draft unique, and it makes you really kick and scream about something we really kicked and screamed about in real time.
Keep kicking and screaming.
You screwed up the
they
Buffalo
should be picking
game.
first. You had it right in front of you.
This is why you don't screw up the Buffalo game.
Not only that, but you use the guy for what end? He's not even on the team anymore. It's like, hey, we got a great game out of Joe Milton. Not on the team.
Yeah.
You got rid of him for a 5th-round pick.
You showcased him, and he got you a 5th-round pick. That wasn't
throwing a 7th.
That wasn't even worth it.
So you got nothing, and then you fired Mayo 10 minutes after the game, so that looked bad. Fire him 10 minutes before the game, and then throw the game, and then you have the number 1 pick. We're not dealing with any of this. Also, real quick on Jalen Walker, one thing that I always kind of buy into this, when I probably shouldn't because there's examples on both sides of it, but when there's teams that become like a factory, like look at Philadelphia's defense. Yeah. Unbelievable defense. Mm-hmm. Half of those guys from Georgia, I think half of their starting defense played at Georgia. So there's something also about, I don't know. Like,
don't think, just throw.
Yeah, like the guy, like maybe another guy from Georgia could be really good on defense in the NFL. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
might just work.
Look, I think that's fair. And I don't know that I think it's a big need for the Pats at 4. But if you have the best player available, I don't. But if they do,
no, I still don't want him there at 4. But I'm just saying he could be good.
No, of course they all could be good. But I subscribe to some of that logic, like we were talking about before. LSU wide receiver, hard to go wrong. You know,
Kayshon Boutte.
Yes, well.
Could be good.
So I get that logic. And, yeah, especially when you look at a team like Philly, they've dipped into the Georgia well quite a bit.
Oh, my God, it's great.
And it's worked out well for them. Although that is some logic that got Bill into trouble after a while.
Rutgers.
He took plenty of Alabama players. It seemed like he rarely took the right one. Hightower.
No, Hightower's the one good one. Yeah, Cyrus Jones was a miss.
Yeah, he had a lot of whiffs at Alabama based on his intel there.